So coming up this weekend, we are going to be going all the way over to Azerbaijan for UFC Fight Night Hill versus Rountree, and I will be honest, this is a card that I'm very much looking forward to. I think it's quite exciting that we're finally going to be getting more events internationally, this time going to Azerbaijan, and what in my opinion could look to be a pretty cool venue, because I did Google the Baku Crystal Hall, and it does look like it's going to be a pretty nice little venue to watch the fights in, so that is quite exciting as well. Another thing too, of course, is the fight is headlined by Hill versus Rountree, two guys that have recently kind of been in the title conversations, two guys that I think now are going to be trying to get back into the title conversations, and then aside from that, I think we do have a pretty solid main card with a few fighters from Azerbaijan and also surrounding areas on the card as well, so I do think that it should be pretty fun to watch. Now, UFC Atlanta, of course, unfortunately for me, I will admit, not my best card. Now, I did pick Buckley with confidence in the main event. That was a very, very bad pick. It turns out Usman's knees, they still work, apparently. So, that was a bit of a sad one, I will admit, but hopefully we can rebound with a good one here. Little poster review. I think the poster is pretty nice. I personally do kind of wish that it had some sort of like Azerbaijan-ish feel to it. I'm not too sure if this pattern is like an Azerbaijan type of pattern, but I do know when they have gone to places in the past, like even the Canadian pay-per-view, they had the flag sort of going on. I do think that we're kind of missing a bit of that with this poster, but it's a nice poster. I do think it looks a little bit funky in my overlay below me, but that is what it is. And then, of course, I do have to mention it. My exams are over. I had my final exam today. Didn't go that well, but I definitely passed, so we're all good. And because the exams are over, we're going to be back on Demon Time. Ariel Hawani, I would like an apology from you. Ever since that you crashed out about my tweet on your podcast, everything that you have said has unfortunately aged like milk. Why is Francis Ngannou asking to be going back to the UFC? You tell me, mate. You tell me. Was I correct, or was I correct about that situation? I would like to know, Ariel Hawani. Another thing as well, of course, is I have updated my sound setting, so if the volume and sound just sounds better, let me know in the comments. If it sounds worse, let me know in the comments. I did just kind of slap a bunch of filters over top of my mic, because I actually do have a pretty good microphone setup, because I used to make music. It was a long time ago now, but I still have my studio interface and Shure microphone still. Anyways, let's go. Mohammed Usman versus the GOAT Hamdy Abdelwahab is starting off the card. And here's the thing, I'm going to be honest with you guys. If Mohammed Usman didn't lose to Thomas Peterson, I would be picking Mohammed Usman to win this matchup. The thing about Hamdy Abdelwahab is, what is he doing? You know, he come into the UFC, he's a former Olympian in wrestling, seemed to be pretty solid. You know, he was just dominating guys in like 30 seconds on the regional scene. Went out there, had a pretty fun fight against Dante Almeida. Like, I thought it was kind of fun, in which he was just running forward, spamming takedowns, had unlimited cardio. Turns out the no contest is a bit of a result of that unlimited cardio. And he come back against Jamahal Pogues and shot one takedown over 15 minutes. A very odd performance from an Olympic level wrestler, by the way. The thing about Mohammed Usman is also a pretty good wrestler. The striking's not amazing from Usman, but it's not that great from Abdelwahab either. The thing about Usman, though, is if you're going to get backed up by Thomas Peterson in the big 2024, Hamdy Abdelwahab should be able to back you up as well. And if Abdelwahab does shoot for takedowns, he should be able to get them, right? This is an Olympic wrestler that we are talking about. So I'm going to go with Abdelwahab. Not confident in this fight whatsoever. I do think that Usman does have some talent, but I just don't think that in this matchup it's a good one stylistically for him, given the fact that Abdelwahab is going to be able to pressure him with success. Tagir Ulanbekov now fights against Azat Maksum. This was, of course, originally meant to be the grand return of Kyoji Horiguchi. I was really looking forward to that. I know Kyoji Horiguchi is definitely past his prime, but he would be a very fun addition to this already fun flyweight division right now. But Tagir Ulanbekov versus Maksum, I do think it's a good matchup for Ulanbekov. We kind of did see Maksum get broad checked by Tyson Nam, and then of course it did really lead into him losing to Charles Johnson. Maksum, out of the two guys that they signed at the same time, Asu Almabayev and Maksum, it does seem like Asu Almabayev is the better prospect of the two. But Maksum's still pretty talented. He is a pretty solid striker. The problem is he's taken on Tagir Ulanbekov, who's a very good wrestler, and he's very big for the division. And here's the thing about Ulanbekov as well, is he's kind of always been that guy, aside from like maybe like the other welterweight that got knocked out by JDM with the liver shot. I forgot his name. Ulanbekov's kind of always been the worst fighter in the Makhachev camp, the Khabib camp, you know what I mean? But I think he's gotten a lot better. I think he's made a lot of improvements since that loss to Tim Elliott, where Tim Elliott was able to defend takedowns and box him up. He's kind of gone on a little bit of a run since then. A win over Clayton Carpenter, I do believe will age well. I do think Clayton Carpenter is a very good prospect. And I think kind of in the same way that Maksum lost to Charles Johnson, despite Ulanbekov not really being as good at striking as Charles Johnson, in my opinion, he still strikes to pressure, and he still pressures to wrestle. And I think that that's how you're going to beat Azat Maksum here, who is a primary striker. So I do like Ulanbekov to win using his wrestling by decision here in this fight. And speaking of wrestling, speaking of GOATs, Irina Alekseeva is coming back. Now, I will be honest, I didn't realize that Irina Alekseeva had been gone for so long. If you guys are unfamiliar with Alekseeva, she had, I guess, like the most random UFC debut ever, where she come in, it was here against Stephanie Egger. She missed weight, right, and then did like the really odd dance move on the scale. She missed weight by a lot too, yeah, she missed weight by like 5 pounds. Did an odd dance move on the scale. Doesn't look like this anymore at all, by the way. She shaved her head. She's got tattoos like all over her chest and stuff. And then she submitted Egger, who's a very good judoka, with the knee bar. And then she kind of lost to Melissa Mellons and disappeared. Now, Claudia Segula, she's only a striker, in my opinion. When Segula got signed to the UFC, I was doing my tape on Claudia Segula, and there's kind of just one thing that does stand out to me. She can strike. She can't do anything else. Once the fight gets down to the ground, it doesn't seem like she's really got anything off her back. It doesn't really seem like she's got anything. Honestly, I do think this is a matchup where as long as Irina Alekseeva doesn't get pieced up on the feet and at least attempts some takedowns to get the fight down to the ground, Alekseeva should have a very significant grappling advantage. And honestly, I think that Irina Alekseeva finds a finish in this matchup over Segula. So I'm going to pick Irina Alekseeva to win inside the distance, whether it's a ground and pound, but most likely a submission. I think Alekseeva gets it done in the time limit. The next fight is going to be a rematch between Daria Zelenziakova and Melissa Mellons, and this is a rematch from the fight that happened before they both signed to the UFC in Aries. This is before Melissa Mellons made her UFC debut against Irina Alekseeva, who we were just talking about. And it was a pretty controversial win. Melissa Mellons won with 1 second left on the clock in round 1, and it was a position where she was on top control on Zelenziakova's back and was landing ground and pound, but in my opinion, not fight-ending ground and pound, but they ended the fight anyway, and Mellons got the TKO win. I think it probably is a win which Zelenziakova is going to try and get back. I just don't think that she is going to get it. I will be honest, I do think that Mellons, once again, should be able to win here. Daria Zelenziakova is kind of like Claudia Segula, in which she's a very good striker, but she just doesn't really have any wrestling to back it up, and Melissa Mellons is kind of on the opposite. You know, her striking isn't amazing. She does pressure forward a lot, though, has decent enough boxing, but she wants to get the fight down to the ground, and I do think, once again, just like she did in the first fight, which she won with getting her wrestling going after Zelenziakova found some success on the feet, I think that we're going to see Mellons find success on the wrestling again, and I do think that we see her win the rematch again. Maybe by ground and pound again, but I think more than likely a control-based decision for Melissa Mellons. Now, Ismail Naurdiev is going to be coming against Jun Yong Park. Naurdiev, of course, did make his debut on short notice. It was, I guess, technically upper weight class because he had been fighting all over the place at 170, 175 pounds over in Brave. And, of course, he did fight again in the UFC quite a few years ago. But nonetheless, I thought it was a pretty good performance for Naurdiev. Now, I know that Bruno Silva is on a massive slide at the moment, and it is sad to see because Silva's a fun fighter, a lot of KO wins. But it was a good performance for Naurdiev. Now, I don't think he's got a good stylistic matchup in front of him. Jun Park is a pretty big guy that is, once again, a pressure forward fighter, has a lot of boxing, has a lot of clinch, can get takedowns as well, and once he does get takedowns, he does find a lot of success. We have seen him take on guys like, I mean, not the best opponent, but Denis Tiulian. He absolutely dominated Denis Tiulian with the wrestling and the grappling, and we did see him find success, of course, against other opponents as well in the past. I do think against Naurdiev, who is a pretty fast striker, Junior Park, as long as he's just going to be able to pressure, use that size advantage that I do think he should be able to have here, he should be able to get the takedowns and find success in that way. And now we have a fight that has been rescheduled between two guys that were meant to fight against different opponents on a different card, but both of them, I believe, had visa issues, but were able to find the fight here in Azerbaijan up against each other. So Seokhyeon is going to be making his UFC debut against Oban Elliott, and I guess you could say both of these guys technically are taking the fight on short notice here. Now, Oban Elliott, I will be honest, I was very wrong about him coming into the UFC. He's been on a massive streak, knocked out Basil Hafez, beat Preston Parsons, beat Val Woodburn, and what was actually surprisingly a competitive fight if you go back and look at it. I mean, more so Val Woodburn just had moments on the feet, but Oban Elliott's striking has drastically improved since this fight. And then, of course, the win over Kaik Brito, which I will say, to this day, I still do disagree with the decision, but it's worked out well for Oban Elliott. He is now on a pretty good win streak. And he doesn't really have, in my opinion, a very easy opponent in front of him. I actually do think that Oban Elliott at minus 400 here is a little bit wise, and I know that that's probably like a situation where, like, I know that I've been low on Oban Elliott in the past, and I do still think that you can look at some of his performances and have an asterisk on him. I know he had a massive win over Basil Hafez, but in the lead up to that knockout, like, it wasn't really like a super dominant performance like I think a lot of people remember it being. And Seokhyeon is no pushover. Seokhyeon is a former Sambo world champion. I believe he was that in 2021, where he became the first ever South Korean athlete to become a Sambo world champion, which is pretty fun for him. And you do kind of see it in his fights. A lot of his fights, actually, he is boxing. But he's typically not really fighting guys that are very good. I will be honest, like, this Ryota Sakurai guy was like 63 years old. Jae-Woon Kim just wasn't good at all. And this Alwyn Kinkai guy was like 5'2". But he did beat Igor Cavalcanti, and I will say I'm very happy that I did actually successfully pick Seokhyeon as a massive underdog against Igor Cavalcanti in this matchup. And in that fight, we actually saw Seokhyeon look to use a lot of his striking, he looked to use a lot of his wrestling, and overall he looked pretty fun. Now, I think in this fight, where Seokhyeon is going to potentially have an advantage is in the striking. Now, the thing about Oban Elliott is his striking, I would say, when he fought in the Contender Series and made his UFC debut, was a very big weakness, but I will say after seeing him beat Preston Parsons and Basil Hafez, I think that it is fair to say that Oban Elliott has made some massive improvements in his striking. But that doesn't just mean that he's going to go out there and beat Seokhyeon on the feet. I do think Seokhyeon's boxing is pretty solid. There is just a couple of concerns. The main one is the chin. He has been knocked out a couple of times now. His 2 pro losses are KO losses. His loss to Han Kim is a bad one. Han Kim put him out pretty badly. And Han Kim hits hard. Watch his fight against Tayalaki Niraji. It's a banger. But the thing about Oban Elliott is the wrestling is very good. I do think he can go out there and get the takedowns. I do think he can go out there and find the success in the wrestling. I personally just do not really see him as a minus 400 favorite. I think that Seokhyeon has a chance, but it's going to have to be with the striking. But I don't think he's going to get the opportunity because I do think that Oban Elliott is going to be out there wrestling him the entire fight. The next fight is going to be between Mohammed Naimov and Bogdan Grad. Now, this should be a pretty fun one. Mohammed Naimov, of course, a former Taekwondo world champion, and Bogdan Grad, just kind of a guy that will come forward and throw a lot of volume and shoot a lot of takedowns. Now, Bogdan Grad on the regional scene is throwing a lot of flashy stuff. He threw a lot of spinning back kicks, a lot of spinning wheel kicks. We do kind of see a little bit of that flashiness now at the UFC level, but I just don't think it's going to work against Naimov. Naimov has proven that he will do anything to win. Naimov is probably the most proven cheater in the UFC right now. The fence grabs, the nut shots, the eye pokes. Sometimes he does it all in one fight against Nathaniel Wood to make it happen. And then, of course, you know, he tried it against Felipe Lima, and then he did it against Khan Offaly as well. And not as bad as it was against Wood, let's be honest, but he still does it, and he still does it in every single fight. I think that Naimov has a very distinct striking advantage here. Bogdan Grad, he is quite hittable. I think that his striking is like pretty limited in what he can do. I think the big X factor for him in this fight is going to be the wrestling. Can Naimov keep this fight on the feet? And I think that he can. Naimov does have fights, though, I will say, if you really wanted to go back in the day and see him against Olivier Murad, he lost a decision in this fight, but honestly, I think that you could make an argument for him to potentially win that fight, where Murad found a lot of success with the wrestling. And then if you want to go, he did make his debut against Jamie Malaki, which he looked really good in, and he had to defend takedowns against Nathaniel Wood as well. I honestly think that this is a good matchup for Naimov. I think kind of once again, we're seeing Naimov get an opportunity here, which I think that he should be able to capitalize on. And the thing about Grad is he is just so hittable. He does get hurt a lot, and I think that we are going to see Naimov knock him out. So I'm going to pick Naimov to win by knockout against Bogdan Grad here. Now, the next fight is not Urubai versus Musayev. It is Sadykhov versus Mota. And I like Sadykhov in this fight. Now, I do think that at plus 300 again, you're getting very wide odds on Mota. But the thing about Mota is I don't think that he really does anything a lot better than what Sadykhov can bring to the table, because we know Sadykhov's a good striker. We know Sadykhov's a good wrestler. Now, the thing about Sadykhov, though, is I am going to list off a few red flags about him. We have seen him have bad performances in the past. Now, he didn't look that good against Evan Alder. Evan Alder has proven to be quite good, but this was a performance which you could say he was potentially on his way to losing. We have seen him hurt and cracked by Borchev in moments as well. I do believe that that fight was also relatively competitive, considering Sadykhov really should have been able to employ a lot of wrestling with his striking. And Mota is kind of similar in that way, but I would say Mota's much, much more of a boxer. Now, Mota come in by just taking the chin of Cameron Van Camp after losing to Jim Miller on his short notice debut there. And Van Camp was never the same. And then since then, he's looked pretty good. He did knock out my boy Tom Nolan, which I'm sad about, I will be honest. But I think that we've seen Mota get out wrestled before. We've seen him lose, or on the way to losing, I should say, against similar matchups. Now, I know that Trey Ogden and Sadykhov, you can't just compare the two. But the way I'm going to compare the two is Sadykhov is a very good striker, very good kickboxer, can get hit in moments, but I do believe that he can offensively wrestle as well. We saw a lot of that on his Contender Series fight. We've seen some of that in the UFC. We can see Sadykhov be a pretty dynamic guy on the feet and mix in takedowns as well. And I think that ultimately just those options is what's going to give Sadykhov the win here. I can't justify him being minus 400. We have seen Sadykhov, despite being on a very good run at the moment, still, we've seen a lot of moments from Sadykhov where there is some cause for concern. So I'm going to pick Sadykhov to win. I think Sadykhov does get it done, but once again, I don't have that minus 400 confidence in Nazim Sadykhov to win this fight. And here we go. We are in Azerbaijan. Tofiq Musayev has been signed off Ryzen to take on Myktybek Urubai in his UFC debut in Azerbaijan, of course. And this is probably going to be a bit of a topic of controversy for a lot of people, because especially, I'm going to say it, Bitsam's probably not going to be happy about me sharing his pick with the world before his video comes out, but I am going head-to-head with Bitsam on this one here. I have been struggling to find underdogs on this card, and I do think that Tofiq Musayev is a pretty good one. I mean, honestly, when the fight was announced, in my head, I thought Tofiq Musayev should be able to win this one, and then I did my tape study on this one, and once again, I think Tofiq Musayev should be able to win this one. Now, I do know a lot of people are going to look at a very big red flag, because we have seen these things happen before. He has fought twice for Bellator, and it turns out fighting for Bellator is not a very good base for MMA. Now, here's the thing though. Patricio Pitbull. Yair Rodriguez was one of my most confident picks on that card. So I picked Yair Rodriguez. He is a top 5 confident pick on the We Want Picks website. I used the code ARTEM for 10% off. For me, and the thing about Patchy Mix, there's no excuses for that one. There's no excuses for the Patchy Mix performance, I will be honest. However, Tofiq Musayev, I think you can make the argument. He's not a Bellator guy, he's a Ryzen guy. And then I think you could look at Kai Asakura, but Kai Asakura fought against Alejandro Pantoja, who, I mean, I know that Demetrius Johnson does exist, but I think that Alejandro Pantoja is really going to try and put himself in the conversation for the top 3 greatest flyweights of all time, you know, just given the run that he's on. But anyway, let's get back to this matchup. I think it's a good matchup for Musayev. Musayev does good things that I think Urubai struggles against. And I think that you can actually look at the matchup against Rebicki here to see this. And this was a very close fight because Rebicki hurt Urubai with his eye. He closed his eye in the first round, and then there was a head clash in the second round, which hurt Rebicki. There's a lot of blood in the third round. In fact, Urubai found a lot of moments in the third round. I think Rebicki found a lot of moments at the start of the third round, and then Urubai kind of come back in the third round, and I think that's the round which I think a lot of people are potentially divided on when it comes to the matchup there, because it was a very close fight. It was very competitive. But if you do watch that fight, what Urubai struggled with was the pressure of Rebicki and the speed of Rebicki. And Tofiq Musayev is a very pressure-forward guy with very fast hands. Now, I do think that Tofiq Musayev isn't a perfect striker. I do think, especially if you watch his fight against Alexander Shabalov, there are quite literally moments where it looks like Musayev is crashing the pocket and closing his eyes and just throwing his 1-2 and then backing out. Not a very good look, I will be honest. However, I think he did look a lot better against, well, arguably worse opponents here. And the thing about Tofiq Musayev as well is I think a lot of people are going to look at Urubai's wrestling. My argument to that is Musayev is a very capable wrestler himself. He just beat Koji Takeda, who I know is on a bit of a slide, and I know that this isn't really the best one to look at, but Koji Takeda is a very good wrestler. He was given Gadzi Rabadanov as a mirror matchup, and Gadzi Rabadanov is kind of like proving to be, and it's very hard to say this because the Bellator guy is looking terrible at the moment, potentially one of the better lightweights on the planet right now. Very hard to say that, just kind of given how bad the Bellator guys have looked, but Gadzi Rabadanov is on one hell of a run himself, taking on Kevin Lee, I believe, next weekend. But anyway, Koji Takeda, very good wrestler, and you watch that fight, Tofiq Musayev actually takes Koji Takeda down. Tofiq Musayev actually initiates the clinch positions against Koji Takeda. And against this Akira Okada guy, this was a little bit of a mismatch. Okada was like 5'5" or something like that, but he was the king of Pancrase at the time. But Musayev kind of made pretty quick work of him. And I do think, honestly, in this matchup, what Musayev does well is pressure with fast hands. And Urubai has shown that he struggles with pressure. And he struggles with strikers faster than him. I think if Urubai can't get the takedowns, I think Musayev is going to look pretty good here. There is a big problem, though. We've got a 35-year-old debuting UFC fighter. Musayev, though, of course, is the former champion of Rizin. He's had his career. He's definitely probably not in his prime anymore. He hasn't fought for a year and 7 months. I do believe that his contract, despite being signed to Rizin, maybe got put in PFL's hands and he just never got another fight. I don't really know what the situation with that is, I will be honest, but I think that Musayev should be good to go. I think this is a good matchup for Musayev here. It's not like... Here's the thing about Patchy Mix, though, man. Patchy Mix was the champion of Bellator. He knocked out Ralphion Stotts. He beat Magomedov twice. Anyway, this is like one of the best guys out of Rizin taking on a top 35 lightweight, in my opinion, in the UFC. If Musayev loses this, I don't even know what the UFC do, because they're probably paying him a pretty decent amount of money. I think Musayev wins, though. I think he wins as the underdog. He's one of the better underdogs, in my opinion, on the card. And now we have Blaydes versus Kuniev. This is just one of those matchups, one of those cursed matchups that, you know, at one point it looked like maybe we're never going to get it happen, but here we go. Blaydes is going to be finally fighting against Kuniev in Azerbaijan. Pretty fun. Now, the fight was originally booked for February, and then it was rebooked again for March, and then Blaydes actually got sick and had to pull out. So now they've rebooked it all the way to June. And it's just kind of one of those fights, man, that when it was booked, I was kind of one of those people that saw it booked and honestly thought to myself, it does make sense. I know a lot of people don't think that the fight makes sense, and I do believe that Blaydes is going to win the fight, and I do believe that Blaydes is going to win the fight easily. But the thing about Kuniev, and I feel like the UFC needs to do this more, they've got a 32-year-old guy making his debut. Kuniev's prime is now. I do understand that heavyweight primes do last a lot longer, but if the UFC believes that Kuniev can ever become something, they kind of just need to throw him in the deep end and do it now. So they may as well just give him a guy that is willing to fight anyone. You know, Blaydes is coming off the loss to Aspinall now, and just kind of give Kuniev the opportunity. And now I don't think he wins. The thing about Kuniev, though, is he is actually a very good heavyweight. There aren't really that many good heavyweights out there. And the problem is, though, I think that there is just a little bit of concern about how he becomes so good, you know, because he does have a very good win over Renan Ferreira. This is the guy that Francis Ngannou beat, and now Ngannou wants to come back to the UFC after preaching about how he was for the fighters and he wasn't for the money and all this and that. So the pretty odd move from Ngannou, in my opinion, kind of you know, Ariel Helwani, you know, you know, who was right, Ariel? Who was right? But anyways, Kuniev beat Renan Ferreira in a performance which he does just kind of pressure Renan Ferreira the whole time. There was a lot of clinching, there was a lot of takedown attempts, there was a lot of dirty boxing in this fight, but he was a little bit of a naughty boy. There's actually quite a lot of naughtiness going on here. Four anabolic steroids that he failed in Nevada. That is absolutely crazy. Usually it's only one, sometimes it's two, but four is nuts. And now they've signed him to the UFC after putting him on the Contender Series against Hugo Cunha, who's actually like relatively good. Now, doesn't really throw any strikes, but is a former Brazilian national wrestling champion, and Kuniev knocked him out in the first round. Blaydes, though, the thing about Blaydes is Blaydes was one of those guys which they were throwing up. He's got the takedown record for this. He's averaging 13 takedowns per 15 minutes or something ridiculous. And then he knocked out the fat Dalkaus brother. What's his name? He knocked out Chris Dalkaus. And now all of a sudden he just thought that he was a boxer. You know, he got knocked out by Pavlovich, didn't even bother shooting a takedown in that fight. Had to defend a lot of takedowns against Almeida, and then once again in the rematch against Ismail got knocked out in 60 seconds. And the thing about Blaydes is we just haven't seen him look to wrestle like he used to. And he's a really good wrestler. He's one of the best wrestlers, in my opinion, that's ever actually fought in UFC, in heavyweight UFC, in this kind of generation of heavyweights, you know? In fact, I think you could say he's one of the best on this generation of heavyweights. But I don't think that he necessarily needs to wrestle against Kuniev. Kuniev's striking isn't that impressive to me. Kuniev's wrestling, I think, is where he does get most of his work done, but he kind of does seem to be like that kind of guy, which I think that Blaydes should be the better wrestler in the matchup, and I think he should be the better striker in the matchup as well. So, although I did just talk for like a minute about how I do agree with the UFC just giving Kuniev the opportunity, it's like how Malcolm Wellmaker is 31 years old. Like, they need to give Wellmaker like Ricky Simone or someone in the top 25 next, you know? Like, they don't have that much time to build up these guys that they could potentially think that are going to make it. Like, it's like how Piotr Jan is going to be fighting Marcus McGee. I think Marcus McGee's like 35 years old. Like, the time is now for Marcus McGee. So I don't really disagree with matchups like this happening, honestly, but I do just think that Blaydes beats him. I do think Blaydes beats him. And now in the co-main event, Fiziev versus Ignacio Bahamondes. Ignacio Bahamondes has been on one hell of a run. He's been looking good. He's been getting first round finishes left, right, and center. He submitted Jalen Turner, and Jalen Turner retired after that fight. And I will be honest with you guys, I did pick Jalen Turner to win that matchup. I did kind of think it's two guys that are 6'3". We haven't seen Bahamondes really fight someone that tall. Jalen Turner hits hard. Didn't matter. It just didn't matter. However, the thing about Bahamondes, though, is we have seen him struggle against guys, in my opinion, once again, that fight like how Fiziev does. We saw that Bahamondes has struggled against Ludovic Klein, where Ludovic Klein was really just pressuring him and was boxing away. Fiziev, out of, to my surprise, was shooting takedowns on Justin Gaethje, and he took that fight on short notice. I thought he had a pretty good performance, honestly, given the fact that it was on such short notice too, and the fact that he was coming off that bad injury to Mateusz Gamrot, who just once again managed to scam himself into a main event with Macy Wilder pulling out the other weekend. But Rafael Fiziev, I think that in this matchup against Bahamondes, as long as he just doesn't get caught clean, I think he's going to be good. And I know that is like maybe a big asterisk for a lot of people. I think a lot of people are going to believe that Bahamondes is just going to be able to snipe him from range. I think Fiziev still has the striking defense to avoid shots like that. He does have good head movement. He does have just a lot of movements in general. He does do like a lot of this, you know, on the feet. You know, he's a little bit of a moving target at all times. You know, the opposite of Patchy Mix, you know what I mean? And the fact that he was shooting takedowns against Gaethje, I kind of like that. I know that Bahamondes has subs off his back. I know that Bahamondes, has done some grappling as well, even before he subbed Jalen Turner. I don't really mind that for Fiziev. Just mix it up a little bit, make Bahamondes think. And I honestly think that we are going to see Fiziev go out there and get a decision win here in Azerbaijan. Pretty good opportunity for him. He's the slight underdog right now. I'm going to expect Bahamondes money to come in on Bahamondes. So I think Fiziev is going to close as the underdog, but I am still going to pick Fiziev in this matchup. And now we can move up to the main event. And in the main event, of course, is Jamahal taking on Khalil Rountree. And I'm picking Khalil Rountree here. Now, I did actually have quite a lot of debate with myself here. A little bit of a debate with the man, Bitsam, as well, of course. Because he doesn't have a locked-in pick yet, by the way, at the time of me recording. But we were discussing things about this fight. And we did agree to disagree about a lot of things. But just to put the pick out there, I'm going to be picking Khalil Rountree here. And I'll be honest, like, the more I kind of think about it, like, I feel like I might be... And this is a crazy thing to say, because obviously things are always going to change. But I might kind of just be done, like, picking Jamahal Hill, like... I picked Alex Pereira with confidence, and a lot of people were picking Jamahal Hill in that fight. And then I picked Yuri Prochazka. I wasn't as confident in that one, because we do know that Yuri is hittable. But just kind of once again, we saw Yuri piece up Jamahal Hill. Hill had his own moments. I'm not going to take anything away from him in that fight. But, Hill, for the most part, was losing to Prochazka on the feet. He got smoked by Alex Pereira on the feet. And before that, he was on a nuts run. Like, here's the thing about Hill. His resume is just so much more impressive than Khalil Rountree, because I do like to do this. I do like to look at previous matchups. I do like to look at previous stylistic matchups. And you can look at Khalil Rountree's resume, like, aside from finding success against Alex Pereira in the first and the second round, what has he really done? Like, a win over Anthony Smith just isn't impressive anymore. Like, a win over Chris Dalkaus isn't impressive anymore. A win over Justin Jacoby's aging very well, but a lot of people don't think he even won that fight. Like, there's kind of like a little bit of a lot of asterisks on here, and I think a lot of people actually will kind of do that, and I think a lot of people actually look at the Jacoby fight for Rountree, where it did look like Rountree was always a little bit of a step behind, and he was landing less volume, but it seemed like when he was exploding, he was finding success. And someone like Hill, who, like, does use his range well, he does have a 79-inch reach. Me and Bitsam agree to disagree on this. I personally don't really see Hill as a guy that is just going to go out there and just try and kick Rountree's head all the time. I think that in this fight, Rountree is going to be pressuring forward. I think Hill's actually going to try and use his hands and his boxing to find the success here. And another thing as well about this fight is Jamahal Hill has never got a takedown. Like, he's never successfully completed a takedown in the UFC. And Khalil Rountree's never attempted a takedown in the UFC. So I do think this is a striking fight. I do think this is like a Muay Thai Khalil Rountree versus like a boxer, kickboxer style of Jamahal Hill. And I think given the fact that Rountree has shown that he can pressure forward fearlessly against someone like Alex Pereira, he should be able to fearlessly pressure forward against Jamahal Hill. Now, there's a little bit of a problem with that, and that does come in the form of Jimmy Crute, who also tried to fearlessly march forward against Jamahal Hill, and he did get paid the price. But I do think that Jimmy Crute and Khalil Rountree are just not comparable in terms of striking ability whatsoever. And I think another thing that a lot of people are going to look at is the fact that Rountree did gas out against Pereira, and he did take a lot of damage against Pereira as well. Like, that third and that fourth rounds, that was a beat down, man. Like, these were 10-7 rounds pretty much that Pereira was putting on Khalil Rountree once Khalil Rountree gassed out. So Rountree's coming off a lot of damage here in this fight. He's taking a bit of time off. Hill's coming off back-to-back KO losses as well. So it kind of is just a battle of two guys that have taken a lot of damage recently. Two guys that are going to try and get a big win back here. But I think that the guy that's going to do it, in my opinion, is Khalil Rountree. I like the pressure. I like the power. That's kind of it for me, really. I don't love the volume. That's the thing about Rountree. That's why I think a lot of people think he lost against Jacoby. In my opinion on that fight, I'm a little bit on the fence. Like, I don't really want to be that kind of guy. But I think at the time, I didn't hate the decision when it happened. I think that it has kind of gone towards, like, me looking back at it now, I do think Jacoby should have got the hand raise. But I remember at the time, I was like, yeah, okay. But yeah, I think that in this fight, you know, if the fight goes to the scorecards, I think the guy that probably has landed the more volume over 5 rounds is Hill. And I think that, and the thing is as well about Hill is we saw him go 5 rounds against Glover, but I mean, at this point, I'm kind of just waffling, so I'm going to end it there. I'm going to say that Khalil Rountree wins this fight. I'm going to say that Khalil Rountree wins this fight by KO. I will be honest, a little bit surprised to see him as the betting favorite and the community favorite as well. I feel like a lot more people would have been on Hill. I'm interested to see what other people on YouTube are thinking about this fight. Are they on Hill and not on Rountree? Maybe they like Hill as the dog, because as I said, I'm struggling to find underdogs on this card. You know, I do think that you could make the argument for Usman as the underdog. You could make the argument for Ko as a massive underdog. And then obviously I am picking Musayev as the dog here as well. So just let me know what you think in the comments below. And I'll see you guys in the next one.